Welcome to the February 21st, 2023 regular session of Findlay City Council. We will start this evening's meeting with roll call, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Mr. Bowman?
Here.
Ms. Frischi?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
And Mr. Wobser?
Present.
Mr. Niemeyer contacted me this morning and said he had a doctor's appointment today, and depending on how that went, whether he was going to attend tonight or not. Nothing serious, but I would entertain a motion to excuse. Mr. Russell. Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of excusing Mr. Niemeyer say aye. Any opposed, nay. He is excused. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to accept the public hearing minutes and the previous city council minutes. Mr. Slough.
I would move to have the minutes approved as circulated.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of acceptance of the public hearing minutes and the city council minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. We do not have any add-ons, replacements, or removals from tonight's agenda. We do not have any proclamations. We have no recognition, retirement resolutions. We have no petitions, and we have no oral communications. We do have a written communication.
A letter from the Director of Development, Jeff Mills, from Penrose Bricks and Mortar, Heart and Soul, for the Eastern Woods Senior 2 project. I guess it's 45 units.
Questions or comments? Hearing none. Letter to be filed. Reports of municipal officers and departments.
City Planning Commission staff report for February 9th, 2022, or 23, excuse me.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding cooperative fishing agreement renewal for Findlay Reservoir number 2.
Questions or comments? Yes. Mr. Hellman.
Mayor, I was just curious regarding this agreement with the state. Do they include stocking that reservoir with fish, or is that not part of the deal?
No, this is just to allow folks to utilize it for fishing.
Got to bring our own fish. All right. Thank you.
We have a good fish population. I have never heard anybody complain about that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department activities report for January 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Police Department activities report for January 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court activities report for January 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Summary financial reports for January 31st, 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Treasurer's reconciliation report for January 31st, 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
A letter from Income Tax Administrator Price regarding Ohio Attorney General's Office contract for municipal income tax collection services.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
So does this mean the intent is to go through the Ohio Attorney General's office as the kind of like the first round for trying to collect, or are they the last, or is it just part of an overall strategy for collections?
Ms. Mayor.
So it would be used in conjunction with our other collection services. However, the key differentiator is that for the Ohio Attorney General's office, it has to be based off of actual past due. It can't be based off of estimates, where when we're doing, like, somebody has not filed and we're just kind of estimating what they owe us, we can continue to use our collection attorneys. So we, as you kind of see in that next to last paragraph, the income tax board said, let's utilize them, see how it works. We've heard good things from other communities. One of the other key benefits is that once we do know, okay, this is how much they owe, it goes to the Ohio Attorney General's. They can actually hold it from any refunds that would be due to them at the state or federal level. So it would be in conjunction, but kind of a different process.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Ohio Rail Development Commission grant to widen County Road 212 and 236.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding stormwater fees.
Questions or comments? Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, sir. I guess I have a question for Mr. Stachek or Mr. Greeno in why we're receiving this letter and it didn't go through the committee.
You both have your hands up.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Jim.
Stashak, it's your letter. You can
Sure.
explain it.
Sure. In the committee, and based on how the committee reports are written, I wanted to make sure that my entire view of the process and the things that needed explored were put in a basically a checklist fashion for consideration by whether it be the committee or this body. There's a significant amount of history and a significant amount of work that went into the original setting up of collecting stormwater fees. And we're talking about, based on what was proposed, a potential paradigm shift in how those fees would be billed. So in doing my due diligence as your fiscal officer, I felt this was the most clear way to present the information because of the concerns and the observations that I was able to obtain.
Mr. Greeno.
I just wanted to say, Jim, that there's some good points in this, and they will be all taken into consideration. The conversation that we had was basically, it was just tabled or continued because we still needed to vet a lot of things. So I just wanted everybody to know that there is still a lot of discussion that's going to be happening with this stormwater rates, and that's basically why there was nothing really presented to council. So.
Mr. Baumann.
I mean, I guess my thought with was it. I mean, a lot has changed since the 1990s, technologically speaking, and the way in which we do things. So, I mean, I guess I would leave it up to the committee and how they see fit to continue this discussion.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding City Income Tax Administration Fund.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Police Chief Ring regarding Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services body worn camera grant.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
When we started looking at this grant, we thought we would have a better overall financial picture of body cams. Do we have that information? And should we take this issue? And I'm trying to think of would it be best for appropriations to look at it from a total fiscal standpoint, or how do we want to? I want to know that we have the cost picture solid, but I also want to then what committee best take this information in and give consideration to it.
Mr. Martin.
It's a great question, and the timing of this is a little wonky because we were awarded this grant and it is a reimbursement grant, and the balance that the city is going to owe, because it didn't cover all the expense of body cameras, will come out of the capital plan that obviously has not come to appropriations or council yet to be vetted. So it is a reimbursement. There is a timeline. There's a 45-day window that once we were awarded this dollar amount to say, yes, we are interested in utilizing it, but it's a reimbursement grant. So if we choose not to move forward, we don't have to take that money. So it's still the timing of us having to accept it versus the timing of spending is off.
Ms. Mayor?
I would just add, so yes, we do plan to have the conversation about the total overall expense and appropriations. As Mr. Martin said, what we see with these grants, right, is they get you the paperwork, they get you the grant, and then they want you to say, yeah, we'll take it in 3 weeks. And so the timing of getting you guys approval is always difficult. So we are not binding, just as when we said we would submit for the grant, that didn't bind us to utilizing it. However, the overall cost is not overall significant, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was like 125, or Chief, 150,000 for the initial. Obviously, that's outside of the 90,000. So, well,
It's 167,000 for the year one, and with the grant, so the total cost for year one for the body cameras for the city would be 75,000.
and if I just may add in that as well, if you recall during budget hearings, we already built in a shift in personnel to be able to cover the kind of inside the house side of it. So that was also addressed in the operating budget.
Mr. Russell?
So, Rob, just to understand the timing of this, you said it was a reimbursement, and once we accepted the grant, we had 45 days to spend?
No. Forgive me if I said that wrong. We have 45 days from the letter of award, which we received in last week or so, a week or so ago. We have 45 days to say, yes, we want to proceed with this grant that was awarded to us. Then we will not receive any money unless we pay for the body cameras. Then we would be reimbursed what we were awarded in the grant. Is that
Understood. I'm trying to now mentally go through I like it when the state of Ohio wants to help us pay for capital projects, and I wouldn't turn away 90,000. So I'm trying to mentally go through my head and say, is this something that we should suspend rules on and accept this grant tonight? Because I want, one of the things we heard out of strategic planning was the importance of body cams, and I think council's made it pretty clear that that was one of our goals, and obviously we've worked together on moving forward with this. I don't want to seem disingenuous when the offer's made. And so if you think that we should accept it tonight and suspend readings to do so, I'll be happy to make the motion. I'm like mentally going through that in my head.
suspending? Sorry.
So we made sure that it got on this agenda so that it did not need passed on just one reading. So we would prefer that it go at least to that next meeting and get 2 full readings. And then we would request that you be prepared to consider suspending at that point in time so that we can get the paperwork turned back in. Again, recognizing that it does not commit us to utilizing it. If at any point we decide not to utilize it, we just need to notify the state so that money can be allocated to another community.
Ms. Frishy?
Are we planning on scheduling, I just drew a blank, a capital discussion between now and then?
Ms. Mayor?
I am not sure. I can't commit to that at this point in time because the auditor and myself plan to sit down in advance of that, and I know he's still reviewing that currently. So hopefully here in the next week or so, I'll have a better sense of when we'll be prepared to do that. We know it's gotten pushed back a little bit later, but that's because, again, going back, there's a lot of different resources out there that we're trying to put the big puzzles together of how we can best utilize those dollars and where the priorities are. So you might see us pull out some items that are annual items to get those moving if it continues to be delayed.
Ms. Frishy?
Can you give a little more insight then on what we're looking at budgeting in the capital for the body cams so to compare it to the offset, just if we're not going to be getting there, can you give some basic numbers maybe? I know we rolled the position in already, but.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Martin?
The balance after the grant award would be approximately 75,000. For year one. Correct. And then after that, the next 4 years, it would actually be it would be in the operating budget.
At 75?
No. Year two would be 147,000. Year three, 153. Year four, 159, and then year five, 166. And I mean, our goal is to try to, if the grant is still out there on an annual basis, to then reapply annually and have some of that offset year over year. So,
Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, letter to be filed.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding insurance funds from structure fire at 824 South Main Street.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser?
I guess I'm trying to understand why we're tearing this structure down. I mean, we don't own the property, is that correct?
that is correct.
So explain to me, Rob, how we come by this money to tear this down.
The money's actually in the escrow account. That's a process that actually happens with fires. And sometimes people have the means to do that and some people don't. And we've been working with this homeowner since the fire, for a lot of different reasons. The structural integrity, I mean, we've been working pretty consistently with them. And they've worked with historians to take out valuables. They made a decision that it was something that they were going to tear down. At that point, we told them that we have this opportunity with the escrow in there. We can just take care of it, because they weren't sure on who to utilize. And they said that'd be great. Just call them and you can utilize the dollars that are in the escrow account.
And the escrow money is coming from where? Their insurance?
Their insurance. It's not our money, but we have
Okay.
to request to actually pull that money out of the escrow account that's associated with the fire from that house to pass that on to the person that actually is doing the demolition.
Do we assume any liability then for the demolition?
No.
Mr. Baumann?
Whose liability is it if something was to, I don't know, explode, somebody falls in the basement and hurts themselves?
The property owner?
Mr. Baumann?
Wait a minute.
Mr.
sorry.
Wobser, I'm sorry. You've asked four
Well,
questions.
he
I'm going to let
answered
Mr.
that with a question mark at the end. Rob, are you sure or not?
I am not sure.
Can we look into that?
Yes,
I
I
mean,
will.
we're going to have our people, or we're going to contract with somebody.
Contracted with a licensed contractor to
Contractor.
demo that's what they do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wobser. Mr. Baumann?
Walk me through this fast if you could. The impetus for this, though, is that there have been multiple deadlines missed by the property owner, and when this opportunity to take it down for them came up, we decided that was the best action to going forward because of the inaction on part of the property owner and the eyesore that it has created on South Main Street.
That's correct.
Ms. Mayor?
I would just add, there's obviously also the safety concern. That has been our primary focus, is making sure that the structure is secure, that it's not causing a hazard to the surrounding area. This is also not an unprecedented process. This has been utilized on the Argyle and I believe also the Sandusky Street property this is something that does happen. It's kind of part of the process to make sure that properties are torn down, and we're in the process with the house on North Blanchard Street as well to get that removed.
Mr. Greeno?
After the demolition is completed and it's basically a green space, I know the owners still maintain it. They're going to keep it cleaned up and mowed and.
Mr. Martin?
Well, I can't speak to that, but we will hold them accountable through our zoning enforcement. So it is still their property,
Okay.
and it'll be a green space at that point, and it's theirs to do what they choose to do with it. But like all situations, we would hold them accountable if there's an issue.
Okay.
Mr. Russell?
Yeah, and we didn't invent this process. This is laid out in Ohio Revised Code that says that the homeowner's fire insurance pays into this escrow to ensure that the property is raised and made into a safe manner. And just from the nature of the last couple of windstorms, this property will throw off debris, and it's it's in a dilapidated state. So the fact that the desire to have this happen on March 1 and talking with neighbors, the neighbors are ready to see this thing taken care of, just because of the hazard, the debris, and the eyesore. This is something that I'm going to ask to be passed on 3 readings tonight because of the March 1 deadline.
Mr. Hellman?
Yeah, the mayor touched on it a little bit. When you mentioned the Argyle building, my concern is this lot ends up looking like the Argyle lot for a half a dozen years, and I would hope that it doesn't become a dirt pit like the Argyle is. It's an embarrassment to the city, and I don't know who's gonna be responsible for that. That's the concern that I had. You know, with a chain link fence across the front, I don't know whether that's he sort of said it was gonna be the owner's responsibility, and he hasn't, or whoever it is, hasn't taken much responsibility for that property in quite a few years, so it just gives me a little bit of heartburn.
Ms. Mayor?
Yep, I would just reiterate, we will follow up with the property owner. I think it's important to note that there is a difference a bit with the property. The chain link fence and some of those other things were actually put up at the request of the city because of other issues, but we will continue to follow up on it.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Letter to be filed. Committee reports.
An ad hoc committee met on February 7th, 2023 to continue discussion from their December 20th, 2022 meeting on reviewing council's rules of procedure. We recommend changes proposed, including start time at 6 p.m., no meetings on election days, lower non-public speakers time limit to 5 minutes from 10 minutes, and draft proposal to be attached.
Mr. Russell?
Move for adoption of the committee report and also adoption of the proposed changes to council's rules.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion? Ms. Frischie? I'm sorry, Ms. Frischie?
If we accept the committee report, then this accepts the changes, or does it then go to legislation or a resolution? Is this it tonight, Don, or is there resolution to go with this or an ordinance afterwards?
Once everything's to the satisfaction of the council for their rules, yes.
Yes, a resolution? Yes, an
Yeah.
ordinance?
No,
No, we
to
accept
your
this.
satisfaction.
So this is it
council's.
for tonight?
Yes.
If we accept this, it's a done deal?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the ad hoc committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay.
Nay?
The ad hoc committee report is adopted.
The Water and Sewer Committee met on February 8th, 2023 to discuss stormwater rates. We recommend continued discussions of stormwater rates and effects on long-term stormwater revenues.
A motion to approve?
Mr. Greeno?
I'm sorry. Make a motion to approve.
No problem. Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the Water and Sewer Committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. That this report is approved.
The Planning and Zoning Committee met on February 9th, 2023 to continue January 5th, 2023 discussions on zoning code changes. We recommend further discussion of zoning code changes at the March Planning and Zoning Committee meeting.
Mr. Russell?
Move to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion? Mr. Russell?
Yeah, really quickly, the zoning code changes continue to get flushed out. There's been a lot of discussion on some specific areas. One is the farm animals, and I know we've had some citizens reach out to discuss that in greater detail, and that is very much appreciated. The plan at this point, we hope to have this get kind of the final review at the March Planning and Zoning meeting, at which point in time legislation, if the committee so desires to recommend it to full council for approval, you'd see legislation. And I believe we would, actually, Mayor, I have to ask, are we planning to do an open house on this, or just have it published for public comment?
Ms. Mayor?
So I would just clarify, because it is not in a legislative form with committee right now, I believe the request would go to council in the form of the report, Then it would become legislation and then go back to the committees for that formal discussion. We do plan to have a draft of that on the website, and if we would like to have a public meeting or some sort of event, I'm happy to do that, to kind of go through the presentation. Right now, what we have available to the public is a summary document, because it's obviously pretty substantial, just the document in itself. So it would really be up to the committee on if they want to have a public meeting to review it. We would have a formal public hearing prior to adoption, just as is required by law.
Mr. Russell?
So time frame, just quickly running through here, we're probably seeing legislation in late March, early April, 3 readings, and then the wait period. So this is still a Q2, Q3 adoption timeline.
Ms. Mayor?
Yeah, it would probably be actually later than that, just because it wouldn't be going to City Planning Commission at least until April.
Ms. Frishy?
I'm not quite sure why we're trying to get a timeline here. I think we're getting a lot of good input from the community on different issues, especially with the annexation, and things are kind of feeding these zoning changes. I don't have a desire to rush this in any way, shape, or form, and if we need to make some changes with public input, I want to make sure we give everything ample time to do so. So I thought originally we were talking later in June, but I don't think we should be discussing that with a committee report with dates at this time.
Ms. Mayor?
I think the desire for Mr. Russell to just go through those dates is to let the community know that there's still plenty of opportunity for them to engage in the process, just as we have stated from the very beginning. So we put it out there and sought feedback before we even started the formal process. So I think, we would like to encourage folks to continue to review and provide feedback, especially if there's specific language that will help address some of their concerns.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. Committee report is adopted.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on February 9th, 2023 to review sub-bullet points in the plan. We recommend continuing discussions.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Mr. Wobser?
Just want to thank Jacqueline Homan for taking and transcribing the whole of the video that is out on YouTube. All of this is on there. One of the things the community had said that they wanted more details behind the inner workings of how the strategic plan is being formed, and I think there's, quite frankly, as much detail as one person could stand in here, because it's all there. So thank you very much to her.
Ms. Mayor?
I would note that it is not her intention or plan to transcribe in such detailed manner every time. Since she's still getting acclimated to the process, she wanted to re-listen to the meeting. Glutton for punishment, I guess. But I would just note that our meetings are live streamed. I believe that's the intent of the committee moving forward, so that it is visible. And as always, our committee meetings are open. But we will have more detailed reports, but not quite to this extent moving forward.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the Strategic Planning Committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted. Legislation, we'll start with resolutions.
First reading for Resolution 6, 2023, a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a cooperative fishing agreement with the state of Ohio.
Mr. Russell?
Question for Rob or the mayor. If this doesn't get approved today, does Chief Ring go out to the reservoir and stop anybody from fishing, or how does that happen? What's the timeline on this?
Ms. Mayor?
I would say that our police resources are going to be spent elsewhere. However, if you would consider adopting it tonight, that would be nice, since this is kind of a standard operating item. However, not the end of the world if not.
Mr. Russell?
On behalf of Chief Ring, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and Resolution 006-2023 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Oh, sorry. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the resolution its second and third reading.
Resolution 6, 2023. Resolution 6, 2023.
Mr. Palmer.
Move for adoption of Resolution 006-2023.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Second reading for ordinance 2023-10. An ordinance accepting the final plat as shown on the Lakota Park roadway dedication plat and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-11. An ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-12. An ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-13. An ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ballman.
Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that after some conversations, you had some interest in making sure this cleared tonight. What was the reasoning behind that?
So since this is a NODOT project, sorry. Since this is a NODOT project, I have a timeline that I have to stick with, and I have to have contracts fully executed within the 45-day period. So I will not be able to meet that after the bid opening. So I would prefer that be passed tonight.
Mr. Ballman.
With that, I would make a motion, our statutory rules be suspended and we give this legislation its third reading.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2023-13.
Mr. Ballman.
Move for adoption.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2023-14. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a contract with Innovative Software Services, Inc. for income tax software to be utilized by the city of Findlay Income Tax, project number 319250000, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-16. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into an agreement with Gemstech, I don't know, LLC for the implementation of an inventory management software system, purchase of required devices, 3-year subscription, and annual data and infrastructure to be utilized by the city of Findlay Airport, Ohio Airport, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-19. An ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the Findlay Codified Ordinances and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-20. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a contract with the Ohio Attorney General's office to provide municipal income tax collection services to the city of Findlay Income Tax Department and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-21. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio to apply for grant funds and, if awarded, enter into an agreement or agreements with the Ohio Rail Development Commission for the widening, relocation, and/or improvements to railroad crossing arms located at County Road 212 and County Road 236.
Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Jeremy has expressed interest in getting this moving. This is applying for a grant, which we traditionally allow to do on one reading, so I would, or at one sitting, so I would make a motion that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2023-021 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Ms. Frishy,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Oh, I think I forgot oh, he's not here, never mind, sorry.
Okay. The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-21, ordinance 2023-21.
Mr. Hellman.
Move to approve ordinance 2023-021.
Second, Mr. Ballman. Discussion. Mr. Wobser.
Jeremy, I know this doesn't directly affect this particular project, but the widening and the renovation of that intersection, I know at one point in time that the commissioners had some issues with this project from the standpoint of who owned the property and who was able to do the improvements. Have we gotten through all that, and are the commissioners up to speed and in approval with it?
Jeremy.
Yeah, so we're going through the annexation process through that, so you guys will be seeing that in the upcoming weeks once that finalizes and get its sit period with the commissioner's office. But what that will be doing is annexing a portion of County Road 212 and County Road 236 into the city corporation limits to allow us to do the work. But we will make sure that pretty much we will not put a bucket in ground until all that is finalized and annexed in. This one is just pretty much when that project goes forward, widening out those arms is a great opportunity to get some grant funding to pay for those, because one way or another we have to widen those out. But to, I guess, answer your question, that is in the process. We're making sure that it's correctly all the way through.
Mr. Wobser.
I think that's great, Jeremy. It's good news. This is a project needs to get done, and as we had talked about earlier, this was going to be a bottleneck at the railroad crossing because we couldn't get that done fast enough, and this should speed up that process. Then, am I correct?
Go ahead.
Yeah, this will provide the necessary funds to widen those out. If right now we have within our capital budget, or kind of what we budget for capital funds to pay for these arms to widen out, but this just kind of popped up and found in our mailbox, so we decided to apply for this type of thing. So it's going to be done no matter what.
Glad you checked your mail.
Any other questions or comment? Ms. Frishy?
What are we at cost-wise on it, just without a grant? Where will we be on that with the widening and then the extension, the grant for the arms? And does that grant give us anything else to help with anything else?
Mr. Kalb?
Nope, this grant is strictly for railroad work only.
So nothing for the widening, nothing else?
Nope,
Okay.
it's only for railroad work because it's through the rail commission.
Yep, I just didn't know if it helped with anything else. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Ms. Frishy,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
and Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-22, or 2023. I have it wrong. -22, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to individually enter into any participation agreement or agreements in relation to the national opioid settlement program that have been agreed to by the state of Ohio, declaring a real and present emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-22, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Did I say it wrong?
22.
How about I repeat? First reading for ordinance.
This is 23. So. Go ahead.
First reading for ordinance 2023-23, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell?
Jim, is there any, I know this is pretty standard, is there any timeline on this? Or rephrased, is this something you need done tonight?
No, and just for the benefit of the other members, Mr. Russell's right. We take care of this typically either in the beginning of the year, after the mid-year review, and most of the time at the very end. But the amount of business tax that came in at the end of last year was so large. I had a conversation with Councilman Wobser, and I felt that we ought to separate this off. So that's why you're seeing a standalone early ordinance this year. So thanks for the question.
First reading for ordinance 2023-24. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into an agreement for the purchase body-worn cameras through the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services grant program and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-25. An ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Baumann.
I would make the motion that ordinance number 2023-025, we lost my train of thought. Statutory rules be suspended, and we give it its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser? Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Rules have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-25. Ordinance 2023-25.
Mr. Baumann.
Move for adoption.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ordinance is adopted. Old business. Mr. Hellman.
I don't have an issue with the ad hoc committee report, but I have a question on one of the items that was there where it says that we're gonna lower the non-public speakers' time and limit it to 5 minutes as opposed to 10.
No, that's not the public, the way I understand that. That's you guys.
It says
Yeah.
non-public.
Non-public.
Yes.
You're non-public, sorry.
I didn't know that that was ever an issue, so maybe that I should address my question to the chairman, Mr. Russell.
It was brought up to, it was a discussion in the committee, and the committee recommended that the council can make their point in 5 minutes as easily as they can make their point in 10, probably easier, and therefore we made the recommendation.
I see, all right.
And per the rules that council can always extend those remarks as much as they want just by a simple majority.
Okay.
So, and that's part of the current rules of council. Mr. Baumann.
Thank you.
Just for a little bit more clarification, I think it was that the concern was the filibuster. So we were trying to prevent one or more members from just talking until, whenever.
Till we fell asleep.
Basically.
Ms. Frishy?
Part of the reason I voted no on that committee report is I don't think we should be limiting council members. I know we try to control rotating asking questions, and tonight was a perfect example of that not happening, and I think we need to have those discussions. So limiting council speaking or any administration speaking, I think, is unfortunate for the public.
Mr. Baumann?
I see your point, but no, because we can always extend when it's necessary. But if it's not pertinent to the conversation, then we don't, and we move on.
Ms. Frishy?
I'm an elected official, and I don't think that any elected official should be controlled by another member of council, but we're moving forward, Brian.
I'm sorry, but the tone of this conversation has gone to the dark side. I'm not going to call on either one of you again. Mr. Wobser?
I'm not on the dark side. Yes, thanks. I would just mention that even our national government has limits on all of their speaking time. Unless you want to speak at 2 o'clock in the morning, then you can have as much time as you'd like. So I think this is a fair enough rule, and it'll serve us well.
Mr. Russell? Any other old business? Mr. Slough?
I'm sorry, this would fall under new business.
Any other old business? New business? Mr. Slough?
I had a conversation with a young lady who unfortunately has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and she inquired as if we would be able to choose a month or take a month to have it Parkinson disease month or something of that nature. And I guess so my question to this body is this something that we can do?
Ms. Mayor?
So first of all, thank you for bringing that forward. My grandmother actually passed away from Parkinson's a couple years ago. So we very frequently recognize and designate via proclamation. So if you would give me your contact information, I'd be happy to reach out and figure out a time that would make sense, either in alignment with the national celebration or designating a local time to be able to bring awareness to that.
Thank you, Mayor. I will do that.
New business? Mr. Russell?
In Saturday's Courier was an outstanding article about school safety, and Denise, nice job. It heavily quoted member of our fire department, Matt Cooper, who is also president of Findlay City School Board. And the thing that I most appreciated seeing was Matt talking about the cooperation between the school district and the city of Findlay's safety services, police, fire, dispatch, with Hanco, with the sheriff's department, with the state highway patrol, and that how the response and the planning is across all these political lines with the one single focus, which was safety of our kids. I complimented Matt at the time on Saturday, and but wanted, if the citizens haven't taken a look, this is something to see to understand some of the planning that is going into that is taking place in some of these efforts, and a kudos to the organizations that that don't let lines stop them from making such a good good overall response. I tip my hat to all, and a special appreciation to Matt for so well voicing that information.
Other new business? Mr. Wobser?
Mayor, I have two things. The body cam funding for appropriations, will you let us know when you're ready to have that discussion?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, if you would like to have a separate conversation, we can get together and kind of just go over it. It's pretty straightforward. It's the initial equipment and then kind of maintenance, but we'd be happy. What I was planning to do was provide just a follow-up letter with that breakdown that Rob provided, kind of outlining the overall cost. But if you'd like to have an appropriations committee to discuss it as well, we can do that. I would like to do it before the next council meeting if that is requested.
Mr. Wobser?
Then, yeah, I guess we'll need to get one on the books then, won't we?
We can get you the letter tomorrow. We have all the information. That's not difficult, but then we can also look to have a meeting, even if it's just right before the next council meeting.
Very good.
We could talk
That'd
through
be
that,
great.
not a problem.
And then second, we had ordinance 2023-22 was an opioid settlement agreement. We didn't have a letter in the packet referring to this. Was this in a continuing situation, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so I was planning to mention that in kind of my wrap up here. So we are a part of the national opioid settlement that the state has agreed to be a part of. We have started receiving those payments. They are continually kind of talking and settling with different manufacturers. So kind of initially, I think it was Johnson & Johnson. There's 2 or 3 of them that were the main ones. There's now kind of 3 or 4 other smaller ones that they're now adding. And for audit purposes, when I provided it to the auditor and deputy auditor, the deputy auditor specifically requested that we broaden the language to specify that we would like to participate in any settlements that are agreed to by the state, that we would then have that ordinance, so we wouldn't need to come back for any future settlements. If the state agrees to it, we're agreeing to that settlement structure, and we would then receive funding from that. So that is what is in front of you.
Other new business. Real quick, I did a quick Google. April has long been observed as the Parkinson's Awareness Month. And it's also the birth month of James Parkinson, the London doctor that discovered that disease, and obviously, so maybe the timing might be good for that.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington.
Other new business, Ms. Mayor.
So just a couple of quick items. Had a great annexation meeting last week. I think that was really good conversation and questions. That information, both a recording of the meeting as well as the presentation, are available on the City of Findlay website. Additionally, we'll be sending out some follow-up items to citizens to just clarify more with them. So we'll work on getting that put together. So more to follow. We'll make sure you all get copies of that. I also just want to give a shout out to the deputy auditor. I know she worked on the GEMSTEC contract at length with Amanda at the airport. I'm excited to get that point of sale system implemented. Additionally, to council members, wanted to make sure you saw in your email the invitation to Public Works Superintendent Matt Stoffel's retirement party coming up. If you can attend, that would be great. He's been a great asset on our team and want to make sure we send him off in style. And I think we already addressed the other items. Thank you.
Other new business, Mr. Russell.
Just a quick FYI, the first meeting in March, so what is that, March, how about March 7th, will start at 6 o'clock per the new council rules. Denny, 6 o'clock, March 7th. We'll have
call you,
somebody come
Denny.
pick you up.
Real quick, for the audience, this is the first night that we've been in this seating format. It's been quite a while. We were spread apart during the COVID. Obviously, it's good to get back to somewhat normalcy. I apologize if I made any mistakes, Ms. Frishy, tonight, and I promise not to do that again. But I also appreciate everybody's understanding and cooperation in going back to our regular seating. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Palmer, second Mr. Slough. All those in favor of adjournment say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned.